Okay, so you want to own a piece of the Tesla Supercharger network. On paper, it looks like the cleanest business in the world. Tesla builds the hardware. Tesla runs the software. Tesla's own cars already show up automatically because the navigation system routes them there. You just need land, a lease, and a checkbook. It sounds like renting out real estate to the busiest gas station chain on the planet. Except the gas station chain is growing faster than any fuel network in history and never runs out of customers. That is the pitch. And it is not entirely wrong. But the actual economics of hosting, operating, or even just benefiting from a Tesla Supercharger site are far more layered than build it and cars will come. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how money moves through the Supercharger ecosystem, who actually captures it, and why some sites print cash while others quietly bleed for years. Let's start with scale, because the scale is the whole story. Tesla's Supercharger network has become the largest fast-charging network on Earth, and it got there fast. The company crossed 80,000 individual charging stalls globally in early 2026, spread across more than 8,500 stations in over 50 countries. To put that growth in perspective, it took Tesla roughly a decade to reach 40,000 stalls, and then just over 3 years to double that number to 80,000. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, Tesla added around 2,500 new stalls worldwide, a 19% jump from the year before. More than half of all Supercharger stalls now sit in North America, where the number of U.S. stations recently crossed 3,000. The usage numbers back up the growth. In that same quarter, the network delivered about 1.8 terawatt-hours of energy and handled 53 million individual charging sessions. Do the division, and you get an average of roughly 7 to 8 charging sessions per stall per day across the entire global network. That is a genuinely busy piece of infrastructure, and it is the reason people assume owning a slice of it must be a guaranteed win. But here's the first thing that surprises newcomers. In most cases, you do not actually own a supercharger. Tesla does. For years, Tesla built and operated essentially the entire network itself, choosing every site, controlling every price, and keeping every dollar of charging revenue. If you wanted in, your only real path was leasing Tesla a piece of your land and collecting rent, with zero say over pricing, hours, or operations. That model still exists, and it is where most property owners sit today. Tesla identifies a site that fits its criteria, signs a long-term ground lease, builds and owns the equipment, and pays the landowner rent or a small percentage of revenue. The landowner carries almost no risk and almost no upside. It is a real estate deal, not a charging business. What has changed recently, and what makes this a much more interesting conversation in 2026, is that Tesla now sells Supercharger hardware directly to third parties through a program called Supercharger for Business. This flips the model. Instead of leasing your land to Tesla, you buy the charging equipment from Tesla, install it yourself, and operate it under your own brand or Tesla's, keeping the electricity revenue while paying Tesla an ongoing software and network fee. Convenience chains have already jumped on this. Wawa deployed its first self-branded Tesla Supercharger site under exactly this arrangement, and Tesla has built an online configurator that lets any property owner in the United States enter an address and get an instant estimate of hardware cost, expected utilization, and projected payback, all built from Tesla's actual fleet usage data. That configurator is worth understanding, because it is the clearest public window anyone has ever had into Tesla's own charging math. Enter an address, and Tesla proposes a standard configuration: one V4 power cabinet feeding 8 charging posts. The all-in hardware and installation cost for that 8-post setup comes out to roughly $940,000. That is the entry ticket. In exchange, Tesla's model estimates utilization for that specific location based on real driving and charging patterns from its existing fleet, typically somewhere between 300 and 450 kilowatt-hours per post per day for a well-trafficked site like a gas station, a convenience store, or a busy downtown lot. Multiply that out across 8 posts, apply a retail charging price around 50 to 60 cents per kilowatt-hour, and a strong site can generate meaningful annual revenue. On top of whatever margin the property owner earns on the electricity itself, Tesla takes a flat network fee reported at around 10 cents per kilowatt-hour off the top. On a well-performing site, that fee alone can funnel $80,000 to $130,000 a year back to Tesla, on top of the nearly $1 million in hardware it already sold the property owner. Notice what that arrangement really is. Tesla makes money twice, once selling you the equipment, and then again forever on every kilowatt hour that flows through it. This is worth sitting with, because it explains why the smartest money in this space is not asking, should I buy chargers, but where would Tesla's own fleet data say this location performs? The utilization estimates Tesla generates are, by its own admission, calibrated to sites with genuine existing foot traffic, gas stations, convenience chains, downtown lots. Try to run the same math on a random suburban strip mall with no anchor tenant, and the model will tell you what it should. The numbers do not work. So why does location matter this much for a supercharger specifically, more than it might for a generic charging brand? Because Tesla's own trip planning software routes its cars directly to supercharger locations, and increasingly to non-Tesla EVs too, since the rollout of the NACS connector standard opened the network to Ford, GM, Rivian, Hyundai, and, as of the past year, Stellantis brands including Jeep, Ram, and Dodge. Over 27,000 supercharger stalls are now accessible to these non-Tesla vehicles. That means a supercharger site is no longer just capturing Tesla's roughly 40% of the US EV market. It is increasingly capturing the entire EV driving population, funneled there by in-car navigation software that already knows your battery level, your destination, and exactly how many minutes you need to plug in. No other charging network on the planet has that built-in customer acquisition engine. It is the single biggest structural advantage superchargers have over every other charging brand, and it is the reason supercharger utilization consistently beats the industry average. Now, the hardware itself. Tesla's newest generation, the V4 supercharger, is a meaningful redesign from the V3 units that dominated the network for years. Each V4 power cabinet can now feed up to 8 charging posts, twice the 4 posts a V3 cabinet supported, which cuts the physical footprint needed at each site and simplifies permitting. Individual V4 posts can peak at up to 500 kilowatts. Tesla also introduced a folding V4 cabinet design in early 2026, specifically to solve a logistics problem. The new design lets 33% more units fit on a single delivery truck, cuts deployment time roughly in half, and trims installation costs by about 20%. That sounds like a minor engineering detail, but at network scale, it is a serious competitive advantage. Every other operator in this industry is still fighting multi-month waits for utility transformers and civil engineering approvals. Tesla is actively re-engineering its own supply chain to install faster and cheaper than anyone else in the business. That speed matters because the two biggest hidden costs in any fast-charging project have nothing to do with the charger itself. The first is electrical infrastructure. Running multiple 500-kilowatt posts at one site requires serious grid capacity, new transformers, heavy-gauge cable runs, and often an entirely new electrical panel. If the local utility grid does not already have spare capacity, which is common in dense cities and along highway corridors, someone has to pay for the upgrade. And in most states, that someone is the site developer. The second hidden cost is demand charges, and this is the one that quietly wrecks unprepared operators. Commercial utility bills do not just charge for how much electricity you use, they charge based on the single highest 15-minute spike in power draw during the entire month, and that peak rate charge applies to the whole month, regardless of how idle the chargers sit the rest of the time. According to the U.S. Department of Energy's Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, demand charges alone can represent anywhere from roughly a quarter to over 4/5 of a fast-charging site's total operating cost. A single busy afternoon with several posts running simultaneously can set a demand charge that follows you for 30 days, whether or not another car ever plugs in during that window. This is precisely why the 8-post per cabinet design of the V4 system matters financially, not just architecturally. Tesla's own engineers have said the goal is to deliver maximum power to cars 99% of the time while keeping the cabinet's total simultaneous draw well under a full megawatt across all 8 posts, smoothing out the exact demand spikes that destroy a site's margins. Smarter load management at the hardware level is, in effect, a direct defense against the single biggest line item on a fast-charging utility bill. Now let's talk about where the real profit hides, because it is rarely in the electricity itself. Selling power at a markup is a thin-margin business, no matter who is running it. What separates a marginal supercharger site from a genuinely lucrative one is what happens around the charging bay while the car is plugged in. And Tesla has been running the most aggressive real-world experiment on this question of anyone in the industry. The Tesla Diner. Opened in Hollywood in the summer of 2025, the diner pairs an 80-stall V4 supercharger station with a retro-style 24-hour restaurant, complete with giant outdoor screens and a rooftop deck. Within 6 months, The location had sold more than 80,000 burgers and generated over $1 million in restaurant revenue alone, separate from any charging fees. That works out to roughly 440 burgers a day at an average ticket of around $13.50. On its opening day, the diner reportedly out-earned a nearby McDonald's entire daily revenue within the first 6 hours. And by the second quarter of 2026, that same Hollywood site had become the single busiest supercharging station on Earth, pulling in charging usage per stall nearly 3 times the network's global average. The lesson is not subtle. The charging bay filled the parking lot. The restaurant captured the wallet. Tesla has said publicly it intends to roll out more of these combined charge and dine locations along major long-distance routes, effectively building its own version of a modern highway travel plaza, one where Tesla owns both the fuel and the food. That is the model every serious operator in this space is now chasing, whether they are working with Tesla directly or building an independently branded site. The charger is not the profit center, it is the customer acquisition tool. A driver waiting 15 to 45 minutes for a fast charge is a captive audience with disposable income and nothing else to do. Retail studies across multiple charging networks have found that a working charging station on a commercial property increases foot traffic by roughly 4% and lifts core retail sales by around 5%, numbers that sound modest until you apply them to a high-volume supermarket, a convenience chain, or a shopping center anchor. There are other revenue layers stacked on top of this, some visible to the driver and some invisible. Tesla itself earns recurring software and network fees on every kilowatt-hour delivered through a third-party owned site, a high-margin, fully automated revenue stream that costs Tesla almost nothing to collect and scales automatically with every new post installed anywhere in the world. On the public-facing side, drivers who subscribe to Tesla's premium connectivity or ownership plans get discounted per kilowatt-hour supercharging rates, which functions much like a membership model, generating predictable recurring revenue that arrives, whether or not that particular driver charges on a given day. And behind the scenes, government incentive programs materially change the math for anyone building new capacity. The U.S. federal government's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program can cover up to 80% of eligible project costs for fast charging stations along designated highway corridors, and additional federal tax credits can stack on top of that for projects in qualifying census tracts. An operator who successfully captures these subsidies can turn a project that would take over a decade to pay back at full sticker price into one that pays back in 3 or 4 years. Operators who skip this step and simply pay full freight are competing at a structural disadvantage against those who do their homework. None of this erases the risk, though, and it is worth being honest about where the money can disappear. Tesla's own Supercharger for Business configurator openly acknowledges that its utilization estimates assume real foot traffic, a gas station, a convenience chain, a dense downtown lot, not a random location with no reason for anyone to stop. Put $940,000 of hardware in the wrong spot, and you're paying a demand charge every month on a site that sees a handful of sessions a day. Software and network fees keep running whether the posts are busy or empty. Cables get damaged, payment systems malfunction, and connectors wear out, all while apps that track real-time charger reliability broadcast every outage to the exact community of drivers you are. Trying to attract a single bad reputation on those apps can quietly and permanently redirect traffic to a competing network down the road. There is also a bigger structural question worth understanding. Who in this ecosystem actually holds the strongest position long-term? It is not necessarily the company bolting chargers to the ground. Landowners who control high-traffic sites near highway exits or dense urban retail corridors can negotiate leases, revenue-sharing arrangements, or escalating rent structures without carrying any of the equipment risk, maintenance burden, or technology obsolescence exposure themselves. Charging network operators, the companies actually running the hardware day-to-day, capture the largest slice of transaction revenue, but also absorb all of the operational weight, the maintenance, the software updates, the customer service, the utility negotiations, and quietly in the background, the companies selling the cloud platforms, billing systems, and energy management software that every charging site depends on collect a steady, recurring fee per port, with costs that barely rise as the network scales and margins that are, in relative terms, some of the cleanest in the entire industry. Put it all together, and here's the honest picture of Tesla Supercharger economics in 2026. Tesla itself is running the single largest, fastest growing, and most heavily used fast charging network in the world. With a built-in customer funnel no competitor can replicate, a hardware platform that is getting cheaper and faster to deploy, and a retail experiment in the Tesla diner that is proving the real money lives beside the charger, not inside it. For everyone else, landowners, convenience chains, independent operators buying into the Supercharger for Business program, the opportunity is real, but it rewards exactly the same disciplines that separate winners from losers across the entire charging industry. Choose a location with genuine existing traffic, understand demand charges before you sign anything, capture every available subsidy, and build a reason for someone to spend money beyond the electricity itself. Do all of that, and a Supercharger site can be one of the more durable, high-utilization infrastructure investments available today. Skip any one of those steps, and you have simply bought an expensive, well-branded box that loses money every month. It sits there waiting for a car that never quite shows up often enough.